Discover the advantage of unlimited access to all the stories and resources from IBJ and inside Indiana business. From insights to inspiration, business leaders rely on the IBJ for all things Indiana business. Start your $1 a week trial now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Off the Record with the Indiana 250 is presented by Prolific. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
It's imperative that leaders like you and me and the great institutions in town just don't get complacent. I mean, when I think about, and Jim certainly gave all of us a history lesson on how we got to where we are today. And that's part of the beauty of Indianapolis is you can make an impact here. Every one of us can make a pretty significant impact. And when you're in other cities, you don't always feel that. I certainly didn't feel that when I lived in Washington, that I could impact the city of Washington in any particular way.
Right. Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Today, I'm lucky to be joined by Mel Raines, CEO of Pacer Sports Entertainment. Mel, of course, is one of the city's most important sports executives, overseeing the business operations of the Indiana Pacers, the Indiana Fever, and the Noblesville Boom, the Indiana Pacers G League affiliate team. Mel joined the Pacers after a career in politics that began shortly after she graduated from Indiana University. A South Bend native, Mel landed a job in the office of then U.S. Senator Dan Coats shortly after graduating from college. Eventually, her work in Republican politics took Mel all the way to the White House, where she worked as an assistant to Vice President Dick Cheney. She was later chief of staff for U.S. Representative Susan Brooks, and along the way, she played a role in the planning of 6 Republican national conventions. Mel put her significant event experience to good use when she landed a role in sports as vice president of the event operations for the Indianapolis Super Bowl host committee. After a few more years back in Washington, she joined Pacer Sports Entertainment in 2015, starting as a senior vice president of facilities operations before a series of promotions that culminated in Mel becoming the CEO in the summer of 2024. Leading up to that promotion, Mel oversaw a $400 million renovation of the Gainbridge Fieldhouse and the creation of Morris Bicentennial Plaza adjacent to the Fieldhouse. She was also president of the 2024 NBA All-Star Host Committee. She chaired the 2025 WNBA All-Star Weekend that happened earlier this year and is overseeing the construction of the Indiana Fever Sports Performance Center, a nearly $80 million facility for women's sports that broke ground in downtown Indianapolis just this September. Adding to Mel's critical role in the Indy sports scene, she serves or has served on numerous local boards, including First Internet Bank, Visit Indy, the Indy Chamber, Cynesys Energy Group, and the Indianapolis Zoo. Mel, welcome to Off the Record podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Well, you and I share a lot of things in common, but one of them is that you grew up in South Bend. One of your first jobs was at Notre Dame, of course, the great university in South Bend, and we also share that in common. That was one of my first jobs, but you had a little different job than I had. You served dinner to priests and also had the fun job of selling programs at Notre Dame football games. Talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in South Bend and some of your early jobs at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great place to grow up. As you probably recall, it snows every day. So you get really good at that. When we get snow here, I like to jump out and help shovel. I'm probably the best shoveler. I think my parents had kids to shovel snow, to be honest. And Notre Dame was the center of so much of our hometown, as you know. So I worked at Corby Hall, where the priests and the monks lived, serving dinner. They hired mostly students from the Catholic high school to do that. And it was a great after-school job. But when I was younger, I would sell programs. It was a cash business.
Yeah.
And I was sort of a ticket broker. So a lot of people going in would buy a program. I'd be right by the door and they'd think, oh, there's a cute little kid. And if they had an extra ticket, which was was a hard ticket. They would hand it to me to say, why don't you come in after? And then I would turn and flip and scalp those tickets to make a little extra money. So I was a little heathen probably when I was younger, but it was very lucrative in my, when I was 10 years old. And and it's just part of your DNA, those kind of football Saturdays in South Bend and the changing of the leaves and all those great things. But I don't miss the snow, but I do love South Bend.
It felt like, I still have family up there. I think you might too.
I do.
And they always get the lake effect snow. So we don't experience the same accumulation that the South Bend gets. But I remember that I think I became a professional shoveler as well. I used to go around the neighborhoods shoveling snow as a kid to earn money.
Yeah. I mean, the blizzard of 78 was a legit blizzard.
It was. Absolutely. Yeah. So you decided you're going to go to IU, to Indiana University. Was that kind of a given? Did you know all the time that you wanted to go to IU, and or did you apply a lot of different places and end up choosing IU?
My parents did not go to college, although I think I always knew I would. I mean, it was sort of I think their intent we would. And my older sister went to IU, and so I went down and visited her and had, of course, the time of my life in McNutt for a weekend. And just at the time, you just tore off a postcard from the back of the brochure if you were in state with your name and address and grade point average and SAT score. And that was the application. And so I pretty much just mailed that in and got a packet back about a week later. That was about as intense as we didn't visit any other colleges. And I think I would have Notre Dame would have been a great place to go to college. I would never have gotten in. I was a fairly below average high school student. I was focused on other things besides academia then. So
I just assumed that you chose IU over Notre Dame because of IU's football program. It had to be because of the football program.
Exactly. Well, when I was there, we beat Michigan and Ohio State. I just assumed football teams always won, and then it took another 30-some years to do it again. But yeah, it was really the only thing I considered was IU.
Yeah. And you were a telecommunications major at IU. Yeah. And tell me, because of course you end up going into politics or in that world. Tell me about what you experienced during college. Were you involved in politically? Was this something that when you were in college you were thinking about, or?
Yeah, not at all. So my parents were not particularly political either. And it was at the time the Indiana 2nd District. And I do remember it was usually a really close congressional race. We were sort of a purple district back then when there were 10 House seats, but I didn't know anything about it. I was a telecom major because I thought I would go to Kelly, but you had to take public speaking. And I didn't want to take a public speaking class. So I changed my major to what my friends were majoring in, which is super mature. And and then I did an internship in D.C. my senior year at the National Association of Broadcasters on the SPIA program, and just fell in love with the city. And so I applied for an internship, never took a poli-sci class at IU with Dan's office. And I think I was the only female who applied that summer. So got the job. And then at the end of the summer, someone was moving back to Indy to work on the campaign because he had to run, you may recall, in 90 and then 92. So I was the summer of 91. So someone moved back to drive him around for the campaign. And I got his job working in the front office. And it began a 20-year accidental career in politics.
It's amazing. One of the things that's amazing is how much we share in common, because I was in Senator Coates' office the fall of 1990, and I remember, he was running because he had to, a special election, right?
He did, yeah. So the special election for Dan Quayle's seat, and then the normal 6-year term in 92. And I really think 2 terms of running statewide back-to-back dissuaded him from running in 98. I mean, I think he just remembered the slog and then gave it up for 12 years. And I remember when he told me he was running again, I told him he was nuts. But I'm so glad he did, and he served again.
Yeah. So you're in D.C., you're involved with the Coates office in D.C. How did you end up then kind of making a transition and getting so involved with the Republican National Committee and the Republican National conventions? What was the process, and talk a little bit about your experiences?
So I think after 4.5 years, I was never a huge policy legislative person. I really liked the political part of it, and I was the office manager. I did a lot of the campaign campaign, filing, all those kinds of pieces of it. And I liked the operational parts of what we did and the environment, but there really wasn't anywhere else for me to go in the office. And so Dan, being the great person he is, helped me, sort of think through what other things could be. Our chief of staff, Dave Gribben, was one of my greatest mentors. And so we talked about the convention, and I think it being in San Diego, as I recall, at 25 was a pretty big draw, and when I was 25. And so I applied. I mean, I think I was turned down for 4 or 5 jobs, and I just kept applying until I think they were so tired of seeing my resume that they finally gave me one of them. And I was an assistant to one of the senior people there. It ended up being the platform committee, which is funny because that's all policy, and I was trying to get away from policy, but I was in charge of the operational side of it, and moved out to San Diego. I lived there for 6 months, and it just was the most fun thing I had ever worked on. And I immediately, when it was over, thought, I want to do that again, and I want to do it from the beginning. I want to see the whole process of how you pick the city and, sort of from day one. So that became a goal of mine right away. And then, I wound up becoming an expert in something no one should be an expert in, which is sort of tickets and credentials. But it kind of gave me the hook to keep doing it.
Yeah, tickets and credentials. That sounds very familiar to what you're doing.
It kind of is a theme. Only there's no real money attached to them back then. It was more It was a different kind of currency, I guess.
But you're if you're running those massive conventions, you've got to be really have strong organizational skills. So is that something that you have had knew that you had that skill set from an early age, or is it something you developed? Or talk a little bit about, because that seems like it just required immense organizational skills.
It is, yeah. It's project management to an extreme. I don't think I knew it inherently, but I clearly it fit, and it has kind of stuck. And I think what I really like about the convention environment, when you work in politics and you've been around this, I mean, the parties don't put election day on. Government puts on election day. If the parties had to, we'd probably never have them. And so what's really unique is that I think because the party is putting on the convention, you've got to, on a date certain, have a stage and get the delegates there and have the lighting and the sound and the TV set up. And I mean, that is your chance to own the national story for 5 days. It's really important. And you've got to deliver the whole thing. No one's going to come in and sort of save you from it. And so I really love kind of working backwards from what that goal is and making sure. And there's a lot of distractions along the way. And I think being focused on the most important pieces of it and has always been something I've really enjoyed learning. I learned from really great people, and then I think was able to be in a position to lead myself. And with Anne Hathaway, who you recently had on, I mean, she and I were in senior roles on the 2008 convention when she was at the RNC and I was on the convention side, and so just had a chance to learn from some really amazing people. But I think it's certainly in my wheelhouse to manage projects that are complicated, on tight time frames, on tight budgets. And I, for some reason, must like it, even though I think it's slowly killing me, but it's really fun. And, I don't think I would do well just selling widgets or something. I sort of enjoy that whole environment.
And one of the things that's nice about big projects like that are time sensitive, are that there's a conclusion. And at the end, you can look back and say, phew, we did it.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of pride when you get through it. When you look back at the 6 conventions you're involved with, is there one that stands out in your mind that, oh gosh, that one was spectacular?
Yeah. I mean, I think I will always be fond of Philly in 2000 and in New York in 2004. And part of that was because they were both well-run, well-executed conventions, and also because we won the race that year. And so it's always great when you work on one and you end up launching the person. I mean, because you pour your heart and soul into it, and that's the point. And even when you do a great job on the convention, if your candidate doesn't win, it's quite a bummer.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So both of those will always be fond. And also, New York is just a fantastic city to be in when you're younger. And there were some pretty good parties that week, as I recall.
Somebody, I have a faint recollection. Maybe it's, what year was in New York?
2004.
Yeah, I think I remember something about a big yacht off the coast there, somebody's yacht, and you made me
I think there
remember.
were a few. Yeah, yeah.
So you had the opportunity, the great fortune to work with the former Vice President Dick Cheney, of course, who recently passed away, who we lost. What was he like to work with as your boss?
Well, pretty incredible. Just an absolute, I mean, just such a, he's incredibly smart, obviously, but doesn't feel the need to be sure everybody in the room knows that. The best listener I've ever worked for, and someone that really taught me the importance of that and not talking over people or often I would have done my briefing and I would sit in a colleague's briefing and I would have given him my take on something going on the Hill. And then his legislative director would come in and give him the same thing. And instead of what the DC thing to do would be to stop someone and say, yeah, I already know that. He would listen to her whole take on it because it was probably going to be slightly different than mine. She was coming at it from a different angle. I would certainly learn something from her view on it too. And I just thought that was really interesting in a town where it's really common to just cut people off quickly.
Yeah.
And I never saw him do that. He was also very patient. I mean, he had been the White House chief of staff. It's rare to work for a vice president who was once a staffer and who I think had an appreciation for how intimidating it can be, especially when you're early on, to walk into that building and brief the vice president of the United States while you're developing a relationship with them, getting your sea legs, getting confident in what you're doing. And there's a lot to learn in a short amount of time. There's not an onboarding. It's a here's your desk and your computer and get going kind of situation. And so I appreciated that he gave me a lot of really good advice and guidance, and also a lot of leeway to do my job. And at the time in 2006, it was midterms, and he was willing to go help anyone he could to help raise money, profile, whatever it was. So I want to say we did like 118 trips in 8 months. It was constantly on the road, and he said yes to all of it if it could be helpful. And so I got to spend a whole lot of time with him, and I didn't sleep a whole lot, and I didn't need to at that age. And it was just a great experience and taught me so much about presence and confidence and being prepared and, so many things that are important today. But he was great. And to rewind, I actually, when I was an intern for Dan, long story short, his secretary had gone to a lunch. He was supposed to be gone. I covered her phone at the time. No email. This is no cell phones. And he came back from his meeting, got canceled. And the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, called for him. And I accidentally disconnected the call, which was mortifying. And then Dan came over to my desk and said, "What happened?" And I said, I'm sorry. He didn't know me. I'm an intern. Disconnected it. He was so nice about it. The Secretary of Defense called back himself, and I just panicked and hung up the phone. And he looked at me like, what's happening right now? And I said, I don't know. I just panicked. And he took the call from my desk when he called back the third time. So when I interviewed, I did not bring up to the then vice president that I had hung up on him twice before as an intern. But
oh my gosh.
I had sort of intersected with him a couple times through mutual friends and one of my former bosses. And so Cheney world is sort of as I knew it from his days in the House through the Department of Defense and then the White House was really good people too, which I always knew, like just solid government workers.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great story. So, I mean, you talked a little bit about it, but the just the whole experience of working in the White House and with the vice president and the entire administration. I mean, it just has to be like pinching yourself. I've heard other people talk about, when they've had jobs at the White House that, you go to work every day and just, it's hard to believe that you're in a role like that. Was that a similar experience for you, or like, how do you, do you ever get used to it? Oh, this is kind of a normal thing.
I never did. And I think the day that you do is the day you should step away, to be honest. And I had the opportunity. I was there for about 13 months. And then I went to work on the next convention. And then they asked me to come back for the last 4 months. So it was really a unique opportunity to know this was ending. And you should absolutely appreciate this, because when you step away, they literally don't let you back in the building. You don't
right.
get to come back. And I thought any day that I was in a motorcade or getting on or off Air Force Two, or he was calling you and asking you to come over to his office to brief him or something, it's the most incredible honor you could have. And so it never got old. And it would also just, you might be standing at the White House mess to get a Diet Coke and you're standing next to Bono. That's just not normal. I mean, the things that happen there, you would just all sort of look at each other like, this can't be true. And those relationships you make are really lifelong relationships. And I was lucky enough to be invited to his service a couple of weeks ago, and it was like our high school reunion.
Wow.
Just, I hadn't seen a lot of those folks in 20 years, and you just have this instant bond. I mean, you're in the bunker together every day, and so it's a really special time in your life when you get to do it, regardless of who you serve for. And I have an appreciation for that I didn't have before I worked there.
Yeah, that's so neat. So you make your way back to Indy somewhere in the 2009 time period, and you get an opportunity to work on the 2012 Super Bowl as VP of Event Operations for the host committee. That, I think, was your first pivot towards the sports world. Is that right after a long tenure in the political environment and government?
It was, yeah. So when President Obama won, we obviously left the White House, and I was doing political consulting work, and I just was ready to come home, and that was going to be somewhere like Indy, probably not South Bend, but closer to my family. And I applied with, I think, 150 other people for one of the jobs. I think I applied for a couple jobs, but one I was clearly the most qualified for.
Yeah.
And interviewed on the phone with Allison Millington, and then they flew me out to do an in-person interview with, they had an HR committee, community leaders, and did that one, and was lucky enough to get it. I mean, I was telling someone, the last time I had a W-2 from Indiana, I was working at Pizza Hut. So while I had connections and I had worked, obviously, Senator Coates, you're working with Indiana all the time. I had never worked in Indianapolis, and I did not have a big network here. And I was really grateful that they took, Allison and Mark took the chance to hire me. They wanted all Hoosiers, and obviously I was that, but I hadn't worked in the state in 18 years. So it was a bit of a gamble for them, and I'm grateful they took it.
Yeah. But what an opportunity. I mean, this was the dream of a city like Indianapolis to actually host, enter the big leagues of cities and host a Super Bowl, one of the biggest events you can host in the world. What a great way for reentry to the state of Indiana.
It was. I couldn't have had a better launching pad, because everyone, to your point, was all in. So whether I was dealing with the governor's office or the mayor's office, and all of the corporate partners, Eli Lilly and Cummins, and everyone was all in. And so anyone you called was ready to step up, or any idea that someone had that was maybe doing something a little new, everyone wanted to try it and jump in and fund it and give you the resources to do it. And it was almost overwhelming, to be honest, because having worked in some really difficult East Coast type cities, Philadelphia is not that warm hug, I would say, and New York. Not that they didn't do a good job and they don't have strong communities, but it's certainly different. And so I came back from one meeting early on, and I said to Allison, like, this is just too good to be true. So I don't believe they're going to do what they just told me they were going to do. And she said, I guarantee you they're going to do exactly what they told you they were going to. And they did. So it was great. And I mean, within 6 months or so, I was just really well connected and established to do the job well, number one, and then to set myself up for other opportunities, which my goal was to stay. So that was also great.
Yeah. So planning a Super Bowl, you had some time versus a political convention, which I assume is a little shorter time frame to set up. But you had some time with the Super Bowl to really prepare and put our best foot forward as a city. How would you compare? Which one's easier in terms of pulling off a big event? And how would you compare the two? I assume that your organizational skills we talked about earlier came into play again, and project management skills. But
I mean, certainly the Super Bowl is easier in almost every respect but one. And part of it is we got to go to two Super Bowl. I was able to go to two. One the Colts played in and almost won.
Yeah.
And another one in Texas before we hosted. And when you're working on a convention, unless you've worked on the one 4 years before, you're just planning it blind, which can be challenging. I think the main difference is when I was working on the conventions, I was the host. I was the event host. It was my event to dictate. When you're working on the host committee side, it's the NFL's event. And not that they're not a good partner, but we weren't dictating how things were going to go, when things were going to start, where they were going to be, and you have to react to them and their timing and their priorities and other things. And so I was a little bit more used to driving it. The other obvious thing is everybody loves the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And when you're working on a political convention and a two-party system, about half of the people don't like what you're doing and half of the people do like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so you're spending a lot of your time on security and free speech areas and all those pieces, which are critical. But I don't think they show off your city that well when you're worried about where riot fencing goes and the National Guard is standing. That's not the best way to showcase what you have to offer the world. And when we roll out the red carpet for Super Bowls and All-Star NBA, WNBA All-Star and, Big Ten football and all these things, it's our best foot forward.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's interesting. There's no politics. Well, almost always, not always. I was going to say no politics in sports, but for Super Bowl, a lot less so. And you only, you make a lot of sense to say that maybe only about half the people really appreciate the political convention.
The other half want you out of town as quickly as possible.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So after the Super Bowl experience, you decided to return to Washington, D.C. and go to work as chief of staff for Congresswoman Susan Brooks. Talk about your decision to you got all these connections in Indiana after almost 3 years working on the Super Bowl, and you decided to head back to D.C.
I did. So Susan was a volunteer committee chair when I first got back, and I met her right away, and she was the perfect community leader for that. Susan's never met a stranger, and so great at developing talent. And so when she decided to run for office, she had to step back from that volunteer role, but I had supported her. It was exciting to think of we hadn't had a female in the delegation since Jill Long. I mean, It had been a long time. So I was, supporting her however I could in her race. And over the course of the summer of 2012, after she won the primary, we sort of talked about what she would need in a chief of staff and interviewed with her. And you can't do anything till you win the race. And I was doing some other work in D.C. at the time. And I didn't intend to go back, but I didn't find the right thing here right away. And so that was a perfect combination where I was back every month. I was based in D.C. I knew how to do the job. I believed in what she was doing. She's a phenomenal member of Congress, exactly who you want representing your district.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a perfect complementary skill set, I think, in terms of my experience and having been in Washington and government affairs work. So I didn't ever imagine in my 40s I would be a freshman House chief of staff, but I loved it, and she was great. She's a dear, dear friend of mine and a great mentor, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't worked for her. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done, was standing up a freshman House office. You don't have a big budget, you don't have a lot of people, and you don't have a lot of time. And Susan had very high standards, as she should, and we were inheriting largely Dan Burton's district and 30 years in office. They did a very good job, and we wanted to not have there be a big gap or miss between members. And so we had part of Vice President Pence's district and part of Burton's. And so both of them were well-established, strong members with good constituent services. And we didn't want there to be like 6 months where everybody said, oh, it's a new person.
Right.
So we wanted to hit it on day one. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. So it was great and kept me back and forth and in touch with everybody here. But I really wanted to live here, and I was living there. And that was probably not going to be, we both knew it wouldn't be long term, but I gave her the first term for sure. And then we would see and happened to get this opportunity right at the end of the first term.
Well, more ahead with Mel Raines, CEO of Pacer Sports Entertainment. We return to Off the Record podcast presented by Prolific. Stay with us. Stops converting, the pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. Welcome back to Off the Record Podcast. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, and I'm talking today with Mel Raines, CEO of Pacer Sports Entertainment. Well, Mel, so you come back from Washington and you have an opportunity with the Pacers organization, and one of the things soon after you join the Pacer Sports Entertainment is another big project, renovating Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and now you're in the middle, I think, of overseeing another big project, Indiana Fever Sports Performance Center. I know you've got a great team with you that's helping you on that one, but gosh, I can't even imagine. I mean, you did Republican national conventions, you did a Super Bowl, now you're a construction project manager.
Yeah, I might like that the best of all of them, to be honest.
I have a hard time. I've done a couple of renovations at home, and it is really tough work. I can't imagine like a $400 million renovation that you'd be managing.
It took every bit of about 7 years, beginning to end, at that scale. But there was something about it, and I've come to appreciate our friends at Purdue and their skill set, which are incredibly helpful when you're doing construction. And Sheila Sexton being our partner through most of these renovations, harder than new construction, certainly. Right. So the Fever facility seems almost easy compared to when you open up walls that haven't been touched in 20-some years. Often you find things you didn't expect behind them, which was the case all the time. But I'm really grateful, Herb, Simon, and Rick Fusen gave me a project that if you looked on paper, they probably would have been wise maybe to bring somebody else in, but they had confidence in me, and I loved learning about it, digging in, asking a million questions. I learned so much about our company through the process and that I didn't know, because when you run the building, I mean, I was over food and beverage and some other of our revenue items, but when we looked at what kind of suites do we want, how many do we want, where do we want them, what should the layouts be, and we brought in the team that manages that every day, I started to really understand our business at a granular level and areas of the P&L that didn't report to me. And so I wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't managed that renovation, because that's how I learned so much of our company. What do our fans, what are our core fans looking for when they come to the building? I knew a little piece of that puzzle, but I figured out the whole thing by, meeting after meeting after meeting to design that renovation. And when we would be in a meeting and someone would ask, how many seats do you want in the suite? And I would turn to our sales team and Barry Gibson, who leads our ticketing team, and Todd Taylor, who, was over all of that at the time. And I would say, we can build anything. You guys have to sell it. So tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what would be the right thing to do. And let's really dig in. And so just helping facilitate the conversations and hearing from them what they wanted to do was how I learned the other half of the business.
That's really cool. I didn't think about it that way. That's really neat. Yeah, because you would have an opportunity to really truly understand the fan experience and thinking about that in depth, and then the P&L, like you said, that's cool.
And every area. So sponsorships, what Terry Tiernan and his team wanted to be able to do, and bringing in new sponsors, and how we wanted to open up the fan experience into the concourse. So we added, bars in a lot of different corners and every level that before, if you were on the concourse, you were very disconnected from what was happening in the bowl. And now you can sort of always see it and hear it no matter where you are in the building. And then when they added, let's say courtside seats, which I'm sure you sat in for a Pacers game. Well, we have in-seat drink service, which is great. And my area of the business, over food and beverage, you can't provide that if you don't have pantries nearby. We didn't have those. So then backing into what you had to build to support what you wanted to do. Because if you set up your partner for failure, we're going to offer something that you actually can't deliver. Right. So really backing into every last piece of the details to make sure we were setting ourselves up for success was really, really fun.
That's neat. So what can you tell us about the Fever facility that's under construction? My understanding, it's not just a practice court for the Fever. It's more involved than that in lots of different ways in terms of the full development of the person and and really a focus on women's sports in general. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, it's a holistic look at what they need, and really grateful for the mayor to see our vision for what that could be. And it will be the biggest and the best in the world in female sports performance, and wanting to locate it as close to the field house as possible. And it will be connected by a sky bridge to the Virginia Avenue garage, so you'll be able to navigate our campus pretty easily. We also wanted it to have a little bit of a public touch point, which the Pacers training facility doesn't have. So we'll have a Hall of Excellence and a team store that will sell unique items to the Fever, so fans can also kind of at least check it out a little bit. And then it'll be everything from obviously training and recovery to nutrition. Obviously is really important, and we're certainly going to be working on some what I would say, research. We're working with David Rosenberg and what they're doing at IU, and he's leading an initiative into female sports performance research, because almost all of the sports performance research in the world has been done on men.
Yeah.
And obviously our bodies are different, and especially female athletes and different things that they're going through on a monthly basis change their performance and their potentially when they may be injured and how you deal with those kinds of injuries. And so we really want to be a partner in helping to find out more of that, to make sure that they're performing at the highest level possible. And then make it a place that they want to be in. I mean, it's going to be bright and sunny. It's got a lot of windows. It's got fantastic coaches' offices and our front office. We think it will be a great recruiting tool for free agents. And I can't wait. We've shown the players kind of a fly-through of it from the architect's perspective. But I think over the coming months, as it starts to come together and we can show them what it's going to be, I don't want to tell you everything that's in there because it will be a surprise when we unveil it. But there are some pretty cool features that nobody else is going to have. And I think the more you want to be in that training facility and working on your game and yourself and your mental health and all those things, the better our teams are going to be. And we will also have a content studio and a podcast studio. So your podcast studio is a little bit of an inspiration for that space, because, I mean, everybody's doing podcasts now, and why would you drive all over town to do that when we can provide that for you right there? So I think it'll be best in class.
Good. So I want to talk about women in leadership, and there aren't a lot of women chief executives in men's professional sports today, but both of our major franchises here in town, the Pacers and the Colts, are led by women, of course. So it's a really special time for Indianapolis and for women in top leadership roles with major league sports franchises. How do you think about leadership, your leadership role, and the model that you're setting for young female leaders especially?
Well, I hope that my leadership role is that I'm doing a great job regardless of gender, although I'm kidding myself if I don't think people are also looking at that, and that if I don't do well, it could be detrimental for some time for other women to get to have the opportunity. I think I probably tackle it a little bit differently than my predecessor. And Rick was fantastic. And I can't imagine doing the job he did for over 40 years. It's a hard business to be in. And we have no more dedicated Pacer Sports Entertainment leader than him. And I will never get to 40 years, or I'll be in my 90s when I'm doing this. So I'm under no notion that will happen. But I think, female leaders are usually, the expectation is that we're a little bit more nurturing, probably a little bit more patient. I get the 360 feedback and I try to lean into that a little bit. But I think for me, Herb Simon and Steve Simon and Stephen Rails, who are our primary owners, are all super supportive of me, as they would be, I think, any CEO. And they all I've often worked for men who have strong wives and strong daughters, and you can usually tell when they do. And they're all super supportive of me and couldn't give me a better platform or leeway to do my job. Maybe more leeway than I would give somebody else sometimes. So maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. Hopefully they don't listen this long into the podcast. But I feel real lucky. And we have so many other amazing female leaders in town, Gail Boudreaux and Jen Rumsey, and I mean, there's more than I could name. Certainly, Carly Ursay is
Right.
The story this season for the Colts are fantastic, and but it's also the men in my life that have mentored me over my career that I feel incredibly grateful, like Jim and Rick and Herb, and Pete Ward has been a fantastic, I think, model of how to do this job for me since I got here in 2009.
Yeah.
He's an incredible leader. And there's just so many in this town. We're really lucky.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the opportunity for Indianapolis when it comes to women and sports. Clearly, the Fever are a huge piece of that puzzle. But I mean, gosh, what's been called the Caitlin Clark effect. I mean, you've lived it. Talk a little bit about that experience, what it's meant for Pacer Sports and Entertainment and the city of Indianapolis. I mean, I constantly hear, and I think I've read that the audience for a WNBA game versus an NBA game, that there's not a lot of crossover in audience. This is what I've read, but that the amount of people coming from out of town, from outside Indianapolis, maybe from different parts of the state, but actually from all over the country and maybe all over the world is a different as well for the Fever. So maybe talk a little bit about this whole experience, what it's been like since we landed the number one pick and Caitlin arrived.
It's been a pretty incredible couple of years. I think it's been just 2 years, since we pulled the number one ball out of the basket. And then I think if anybody told you that day that they knew what was going to happen, they're lying for sure, because none of us really knew. We knew it was exciting and it would be great for the team and the franchise, but the degree to which was, that was unknown and became known over time. It was a little bit like a tidal wave at times coming over our heads, but it's she's lifted the whole sport a level that I don't think few athletes have done for their sport. I've tried to think of other analogies, and, Tiger Woods, maybe what he did to golf is similar. And I think the women are running with that opportunity, which is fantastic. Yeah. It's put the Fever on the map. To what you were saying, from what we know, our data, we have about 5% overlap between Pacers and Fever fans right now, and maybe that will change, but and about 30% of our fans are coming from out more than 150 miles to see games. And so I think it's become a bucket list item. They're coming from all 50 states and a lot of foreign countries, which is a great opportunity for our city and our state to welcome people who've never been here before. Obviously, we play largely during summer when there's school break and other things, and people are taking vacation, which I think drives another tourism opportunity for us. And we're trying to look at how we can be as helpful as possible to those fans coming and curate really bespoke, cool weekends while they're here. So, there's a lot more to come, I think, with the Indiana Fever. It's an amazing brand. I think the team is what they did last season is unbelievable to me, with the number of injuries they had and bringing in some hardship players who had great experience and were on their sofas in July and playing to the overtime in the semifinals last game to go to the finals. It was remarkable what they did, and stayed together as a team. And, we had the hospital squad traveling with the squad that was playing. And to have that on the tail end of what happened with the Pacers was, sort of special to have both teams supporting each other too. So I think lots of upside for women's sports. I'm excited what the Ignite is doing, what you see in volleyball. Professional women's hockey is growing.
Wow.
Professional women's soccer is obviously hitting its stride too. So there's a lot going on in the ecosystem. I think sponsors are seeing it. They're jumping on board along with the fans, and that's really what you needed for it to take off.
Yeah.
But I certainly could not have guessed we'd be here 2 years ago. I wouldn't also want to go back in a time machine, because it was, hosting the All-Star game while getting ready to draft her, and the amount of interest was just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable how Indianapolis has had the opportunity to lead in women's sports as a result, and then unexpectedly, Indianapolis and you get in the Pacer Sports Entertainment get the opportunity to host a WNBA All-Star game, like all of a sudden, like in a very short time period, right?
I mean, that's one of those, you're handed the opportunity and you're crazy if you don't grab it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were lucky to get it. I would have liked a little more time, but there was nothing we didn't do that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
We did it all in a short amount of time, and sometimes less time is better.
Exactly.
You've led a lot of these LOCs, and sometimes you'd rather do it in less time. And so
right.
we just made decisions and ran. And the community, our corporate community, is so great, and so many of the partners said, this is what we did for NBA All-Star, and we're not going to do a penny less.
Yeah.
And so raising the money was quick and easy, and we could fully fund everything we wanted to do and have the same community impact, maybe in some areas even more because of the time of year that the event takes place. So
didn't have to deal with the snow like you did for the NBA
no
All-Star
snow
game.
plan, thank God. Yeah, that was fantastic. And the New York Times did an article, I think it was the Monday after, and if I were going to write it myself and put the photos in it myself, it wouldn't have been better. It was exactly what you would want the New York Times to say about your city and its love for basketball and what it did to an event that is just starting to grow into what I think it can be. So I was really happy with how the whole thing turned out.
That's great for the city. So I want to talk a little bit about leadership again here. And we, of course, everybody got the incredible ride to the finals, the Pacers making it to not just the finals, but the final game of the finals. You can't go any further, and then had the devastating injury to Tyrese Halliburton. And, I always think to myself, gosh, it'd be easy to lead a team when they're playing like that. I mean, lead in terms of, being part of an organization and everything's going so well. You're having so much fun. The city's on fire like it never is, except for something like that. And then, of course, Tyrese is on the mend. He's got a rehab. He's out for this year. I would think leading would be completely different. And same thing, with Caitlin Clark, an injury right before the WNBA All-Star game. She couldn't play. And of course, like you said, an amazing run by the team afterwards with the season, making it to the finals. But maybe talk a little bit about what it's like to lead this year, the Pacers Sports and Entertainment, when it's not, the team's not on fire. And, it's easy for fans to get a little down in the dumps. Gosh, we just had this amazing run. People understand, of course, injuries occur, but talk about how you lead in those times.
Yeah, we have a company mission that is make everyone a fan. It's pretty simple, and I think it's more important than ever to have it. To have that mission, have everybody understand how they play into that, how their role is an important part of it. And it sounds simple, but when you think about the number of things we do, obviously the Pacers and the Fever are core, and the Boom, the core reason we exist, but we do a lot of other things, from ice skating on the plaza right now to, all these other concerts and events, and basketball tournaments and high school championships and all those things. And I was certainly the smartest business CEO, in the NBA for a minute last year, and it had nothing to do with my ability to do the job. We just maximized the opportunity as best we could for both of those teams. But it's really important to me that I show up exactly the same, whether it was June 21st last year, I think Game 7 was the 22nd, or every single day of this season. And I mean, we've got a group of guys that everybody is very understanding in town of the position we're in after what happened in Game 7, who are still out there fighting every single night to win these games. And that is something that Herb has always been committed to, is putting a team on the court that's going to compete. And we've got a great culture and the best coach, I think, head coach in the NBA, who's brilliant, leading this team. And so we're going to play to the best of our ability this year. And I think everybody knows that there's a lot of bright years in front of us. And so there's a lot of silver linings too, that I think younger players that maybe wouldn't have had the court time, that would have taken a lot longer maybe to develop, or getting that right now. And we had a great game last night, and we've had some real bright spots lately. But for me, I show up the same every single day, and we need to still maximize the opportunity we have as a business, regardless of the performance of the teams on the court. We've got to be innovative. We've got to be driven. And if anything, it's easier certainly it's easier last season. That's obvious. But how I show up every day and lead the company and push us to think differently that should be absolutely no different. And so I try to be the same person every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how Herb is too. I mean, that's the beauty of him is 40 some years in this league. He doesn't ride the highs or the lows too high or too low. And, he's as excited every day about the teams and the seasons. And if he's not going to be upset about it, I'm certainly not going to be upset about it.
Well, I kept telling my son who, we loved going to some of those games, and like, you can't go any further. I mean, went to the final game of the finals. I mean, yeah, we didn't bring home the trophy, but understandably, given what happened, but what an amazing ride. It
was just magical to see the community come together the way they did, the whole state and our fans from around the world, and to get to be a small part of it was pretty incredible. But those players are special. What Rick Carlisle did is special, and the whole Simon family. I mean, it bonds this family together. Herb talked about that in his Naismith Hall of Fame speech. He's owned a lot of businesses, and nothing has ever brought his family together like the teams. And so just to see the joy in all of them, this has been, for some of them, their entire lives have been around the Pacers and the Fever. And so it was just pure joy to be a part of, and I hope we get to be a part of more of them.
Yeah. We all do. So, Jim Morris, of course, is someone that you worked closely with, and so incredible in terms of the history of our city and the sports movement in our city. He played such a big role, and he constantly was focused on the health of downtown, the health of our sports industry. I'm curious from your perspective, how do you think Indianapolis, we've just talked about a lot of great sporting events. Of course, we're hosting the Final Four next year. But how, when you think about, I know because you're very involved beyond just Pacer Sports Entertainment, you're involved in a lot of important institutions in this city and boards, et cetera. But how do you think, how does Indianapolis continue to lead? How do we not get too comfortable and have cities like Nashville and Las Vegas and other cities that want to steal some of the great, events that we host? How do we make sure that we stay at the forefront?
I think it's imperative that leaders like you and me and the great institutions in town just don't get complacent. I mean, when I think about, and Jim certainly gave all of us a history lesson on how we got to where we are today. And that's part of the beauty of Indianapolis is you can make an impact here. Every one of us can make a pretty significant impact. And when you're in other cities, you don't always feel that. I certainly didn't feel that when I lived in Washington, that I could impact the city of Washington in any particular way.
Right.
And when we serve on a few boards together, when you are, at the Indy Chamber and you think of what Matt Mindrum's doing there, and you think of Leonard and Visit Indy and Patrick and the Sports Corp and Vanessa and the Indiana Chamber and Taylor Schaefer and Downtown Indy and all these great institutions that have been around for a long time. And I think 40 years ago, 45 years ago, turned us into the sports city and this amazing downtown that you can navigate and walk and host these major events, and are building the Signia now and so much other great development. These cranes, while being a bit of a hassle to drive from west to east in downtown, are wonderful things to see. And it's a thriving city, but we can't sit back and say, well, it's all going to be fine. I mean, I think there's still a number of problems we're all concerned about tackling, and we want to be sure that people want to be downtown. I think we need to grow residential downtown. We need to be sure that the businesses that are here, stay anchored here. I mean, we're not going anywhere. Gainbridge Fieldhouse is the best arena in the country to watch a basketball game in. And so how do we continue to make sure that it's thriving and people are down here on a regular basis? And Herb and the Simon family are very bullish on what's happening here, and they're invested in building several projects. And I would say looking at more to come and how we can partner with the city and the state to continue to thrive downtown. I mean, Jim's famous saying is you can't be a suburb of nothing. And I do think that downtown is everybody's neighborhood. It's the economic engine for the state. It's where our state capital is meeting on a regular basis. And I know the leadership there feels strongly about it too. And so all those things make me hopeful, but we just can't get complacent.
Right. Couldn't agree with you more. You summed it up well. Well, Mel, we've made it to Off the Record, little speed round we do with every person we have here on Off the Record. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions to get to know you even a little bit more. So tell us your favorite movie.
This is going to sound funny because of the time of year, but it's The Holiday. It's a rom-com, but it is always my favorite. I always watch it during the holiday season. It is timeless. It's my favorite movie.
Favorite place to vacation?
It's anywhere that I am with my friends, so I'm not a big beach person, but we went to the Paris Olympics. We went on a safari last year. We're doing whitewater rafting in Colorado or in the Grand Canyon this year. And so it's more about being with the right people for me than what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's cool. Favorite musical artist?
I'm going to go Billy Joel.
Oh, I like that one.
Timeless.
That's a good one. What is the first thing you do in the morning?
This is terrible, but I check my phone. I know you're not supposed to, but I would be lying if I told you that's not the first thing I did.
I think that's a common one. Title of the last book that you read or a book that you're reading and enjoying?
I just finished Thunderstruck by Eric Larson, which is a nonfiction. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but it was about he wrote The Devil in the White City, which is a great book. And this one is about Marconi and the telegraph overlaid with a murder case, and he sort of weaves these things together in a really interesting way. I have found it fascinating.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I understand that you might have a new hobby or newer hobby. So a hobby that you've recently taken up.
So it's Legos. I outed myself, on the 250 list. I don't know how it started, but I really love them. And I listen to podcasts and I sort of zone out and work on them. And I finished Notre Dame because we played in Paris in January and I got to tour it right when it reopened. And so it was a giant set. And so now I'm ticking off places I've been. I try to build places I've been to.
So if I came to your house, would I see all these Lego models all over the place?
I'm starting to not know what to do with them. I'm a little embarrassed. I just finished the Capitol and now I'm headed toward the Botanical Gardens.
Well, if you want to bring one of them, put them back here on our set for the podcast, so you can bring one.
Okay, I will do that.
If you build St. Basil's, which I think there is one, the cathedral in Moscow and then Red Square, which Russia has a special place in my heart because I live there. If you build that one for me, okay. I'll even go buy it and then have you build it and I'll put it right back here.
Do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. It's a deal. Okay.
So last question, best advice you ever received?
I'm going to give this one to Jim. Especially for the perch I have now, is look at your opportunities in their broadest possible context. And so I think it's easy to, when things come up, you're busy, you say no to a lot of things, or you just, maybe you're dialing it in. And Jim would always push me and teach me about how we have this important role in town and we can always do more and think bigger. And he was right.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Mel, thank you so much for joining Off the Record with the Indiana 250, and thanks for all you're doing for our city, our state, and leading a very important sports franchise in our city and state. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm as you know, I'm a big fan of IBJ. I think what you guys do is really important for the city and the state, and appreciate all you do too.
Thanks, Mel.
Yeah.
To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 Off the Record conversation soon.
Curious about what's shaping law in Indiana? From court reforms and NIL rights to mental health courts and energy commissions, the Indiana Lawyer Podcast breaks down the biggest legal issues of our time. I'm your host, reporter Maura Johnson. Join me every other week for your insider guide to what matters in law and why it impacts you. Subscribe now in your favorite podcast app or at ibjpodcasts.com.
On the go? So are we. Get the IBJ Media app, your all-in-one news source for Indiana business news. Get breaking news alerts, read every story from IBJ, Inside Indiana Business, and the Indiana Lawyer, and listen to your favorite podcasts all in one place. Big news, small screen. Search IBJ Media and download the app today.